Now, just how ignorant are most of us? We think we are free, we think we are smart, and we think we know it all. What a crock of BS. Just how smart are we? When eventually North America will become the prison center for the world. Why do you think they are spending our money on prisons? Why do you think the Canadian military are being posted around our natural resources and around native ancestral lands? To protect the citizens as they are ignorant enough to believe? Just like they call the tar sands Canadian natural resources? They are not ours, people. It's owned by a private company. We have to import our gas and oil. Who do you think owns all the power in Canada? It's Paul Desmarais of Power Corp, not us. Wake up. Look at the politicians, Harper, Bob Ray, Paul Martin, and all of the others. How many are tied to Paul Desmarais and all the corrupt idiots out there? Are we this stupid not to check things out? Why do we pay so many taxes? Why are we in debt? Do we truly know the truth? Do we even care? Any military personnel that thinks he's doing us a favor needs to take a good long look at themselves, because they aren't. They are there to bully and help steal the Canadian and Indigenous people's natural resources. Plain and simple. They are letting their own leaders take away from their own children's futures. Now, just how stupid is that? And you call yourselves protectors of the people? Why do you think Harper lost his seat on the International Security Committee? Would NATO be able to come into Canada so easily if our Prime Minister sat on the board of directors? Come on, people. They get us with duplicity of lies. Many, many, many lies. Because they have an agenda, and it's not to our benefit. How many of you are proud to be spending less money at the borders for security checks initiated through the Security and Prosperity Partnership Agreements called the SPP? We are now under U.S. security, and when the U.S. decides that we are a threat to their security, they presently have the right to take any Canadian citizen, take them without legal counsel for as long as they wish without a trial. Do you even realize what the SPP means? It's a stepping stone to a one-world government. Soon you will hear about a triumvirate governing body who have been initiating trials in Montreal, tweaking how to run a North American Union. To those idiots who think we will be saving money as the government spills its BS about how great this is and how you keep believing their lies and play on words and dress-up games, many of you will end up in poverty or behind bars. Do you even realize that you won't be saving a dime? What happened with Air Canada? They were told that they'd be thrown in jail if they prolonged their strike. Jail? How many people died because of cuts within the SPP to adopt the U.S. and Mexican standards within our food safety requirements? Bet you didn't know that, did you? Unions better let go of their bought and paid for people and start working for their workers. And obviously our politicians have gone insane, or either they are soulless, just like the rest of the brainwashed, ignorant people who refuse to see the truth so that they can continue to be comfortable at the expense of everyone else. People are protesting everywhere, but the news doesn't show it unless they want to trash it. Families don't know where to throw themselves because of high costs, yet the police and military protect the governments instead of the people. A new U.S. bill just passed that Canadians will have to be subject to, because you are no longer allowed to protest or say anything where their security is when they are on duty protecting their political brain-dead and soulless puppets. I, for one, hope they see the light soon. Do you realize that many Canadians are losing their jobs to American security and NATO personnel? Do you even care about someone losing their homes and families because of corrupt governments? No governments are working for the people. They work for themselves, just like every one of us, wanting our things, our toys, our little gadgets. Some think they are, but they are simply living the illusion and feeding the beast without giving a second thought to the consequences that will come from it. They are too blind to see what they are doing. Oh no, that won't happen, you say? Wake the hell up. Stop wasting humanity's time with your brainwashed attitude and start to open your eyes to reality, plain and simple. We are all responsible for what is happening now because we let it. As Canadians and U.S. citizens, many of us have decided that it's time to clean up the trash and negative karma instilled by the false illusion of democracy practiced in America. Too many of us have forgotten the past or were told lies through history books. Our entire existence in America was based on greed and ego. The ones I pity the most are the military and police officers and their families. They are the biggest fools of all, and all for a paycheck. How much do we want to keep our things, our toys, at the cost of humanity? How many will help those who destroy, manipulate, and control us out of their own greedy agendas through illusions? How many more of our troops will we lose over ignorance of the people who can stop the insanity? How many cops will stand in the way of true democracy when they have sold their souls for a paycheck over choosing the people and our rights, and even their own families? We and our ancestors were used as pawns for the destruction of love and peace through control mechanisms and brainwashing techniques, so that we'd assume that we were told the truth by our governments, teachers, the monarchy, the religions, and those we have blindly followed while we destroy the earth and humanity and all that is good in the world. Only we can make things right. Only we can stop the insanity. How do we do this? We do it by removing the cancer from our lives. We remove the cancer that uses and abuses through illusions and play on words. Many of you still can't see through the illusions and manipulations, but eventually, and soon enough, you all will. Unfortunately, if we wait for all to awaken to the con of our very existence and purpose here in America and worldwide, it will be too late, and this is why we must act now. First, we need to regrow backbone and regain our voices, as many no longer possess any due to giving in to blind complicity. Next, we stop complaining and start doing. Why do we need a referendum on decolonization when Canada and the United States are supposed to be free countries? That's because we were never free from the clutches of greed built within a system of illusions. We need to expose the truth about the monarchies and the Holy See, all-seeing eye, the Vatican State. We need to start truly seeing the truth once and for all. And we can't truly decolonize properly until we decolonize ourselves from the Vatican Roman Empire, as they choose the kings and queens. They control everything other than those few countries they have no present control of. It's why Syria and Libya and the others were invaded, by their manipulation of the peoples and their final takeover of the earth. Iran is left. So will we wait till they destroy everything before we take a stand? And that's why we need to decolonize ourselves from the system. Without having to go into world changes happening in the last century and the New World Order spoken about and implemented by our leaders and others, it is obvious that we have been manipulated and lied to for eons. It's time to wake up before we are too far gone for any hope or true solution to be completely out of reach and find ourselves in the middle of civil wars happening on a global scale. Our taxation is going through the roof and most of us have no clue where our money is going. The North American natural resources are being depleted and privatized while our leaders lobby other countries for these private corporations instead of looking out for our country's best interest. They are instilling bills and laws that have no common sense and not to the benefit of the population. We have found the solution everyone in every country needs. So it's time to stop the insanity and to take things back into our own hands once and for all. What is the solution and how can we stop the insanity? We do it through utilizing existing international laws, remain lawful, and avoid more tyranny and violence and injustices brought upon our peoples and all peoples of the world. So it's time to clean up the mess we are in, open our eyes wide open to the illusions, and know exactly who we are paying in our healthcare, education, social services, and hiding behind their illusion. Take a wild guess. Who is the richest in Canada but the nuns, the priests? They were the ones who took over teaching. They were the ones who took over healthcare 500 years ago and since. And they have done so in many countries. And they have signed concordats and treaties with our governments way at the beginning for total control, because they deem themselves the true owners of the earth. So you just need to follow the money and the insanity. Then we change the banking laws and look out for one another as we start to see each other as human beings instead of furthering an evil agenda by the powers that be and keeping us fighting amongst ourselves while they pull the puppet strings. You will find within the Referendum petition the mention of the oldest living constitution on earth that if practiced by all would instill world peace. However, it was used, defiled, then the original version buried and hidden from society. The United States, Canada, and the United Nations and other countries were built upon it. The Haudenosaunee Five Nations Constitution was inserted to prove to the world and the United Nations that the indigenous peoples of North America were far from uncivilized or savages, as they were more civilized than the colonizers and the Jesuits and priests who came here. It's why they took their templates from it. This is how federal governments were built, people, because the Haudenosaunee Constitution means that if practiced, it is the voice of the people above all governments. Now, the UN decolonization process for Canada and the USA, as well as for the indigenous North American peoples, were manipulated so that the powers that be could keep defiling these lands and the people and keep stealing the natural resources. The petition is also written for both Canadian and U.S. citizens, since the ones who have first power to decolonize are the indigenous peoples of North America, as they are neither Canadian nor U.S. citizens. They are their own nations and the original caretakers of these lands, which is something too many people would like to forget. And as the saying goes, what goes around comes around. And if we don't want to suffer those consequences by the powers that be, then we need to change how our governing bodies govern and fix the karma we are about to face if we don't, just like the indigenous peoples were made to suffer, and still made to suffer to this very day. This is not about religions or the evil corporations. It is about who is pulling the strings and creating the lies. This is about truth and how they have blindsided those who believed in them. Now, there's nothing wrong with churches, going to church. That is up to you. What is wrong is that those at the top have manipulated everything for their own doings, their own greed, their own agendas. And this is what we are fighting today. And as creator beings, we need to start above all else to respect the earth, all life, as well as to respect each other and our differences, so that we can build a true, peaceful, and loving existence for our children and others to come. We are all equal in the eyes of Creator of all, and all equals within all of creation. And it's time to drop the ego and to fill ourselves with love, appreciation, and gratitude for all life instead. It's time for compassion, people. But none of this will be possible if we don't stand up and take back what is ours and out of the hands of the puppet masters. So where do we go from here? What will a referendum do? A referendum will give us the power to decide our own futures and remove final signing authority from our governing bodies. Everything can still remain the way it is for most part, and then through referendums we can decide what we'd like to change. So it's not that hard, people. It's actually very simple. And sometimes the answers are so simple, they're right before our eyes, but we don't see them. So all we need to do is take a stand, make things right for the indigenous nations, give them the justice they deserve, and for us to truly be responsible human beings within all of creation, and to do what is right for all life, and not to allow corporate greed rule the earth, nor the ones behind it, which is the Roman Empire. Now I'd like to thank you for your time, and we'll move on to the petition so that you may be able to hear exactly what it is that I'm trying to say. Thank you. The Great Peace, the Voice of Humanity, National and International Decolonization Independence Referendums, Ending Corruption Within Our Countries and the World. Drafted March 8, 2012. We, the undersigned people of Canada and the United States of America, support and demand a referendum to complete decolonization of all North American lands of Turtle Island, and standing by the Great Law, White Roots of Peace Constitution, dating back to the 1100s with the indigenous original nations, and for our full independence rights to true and complete decolonization through the United Nations Decolonization Declaration of 1960. From Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada, and from the Crown the Holy See Vatican State, as self-imposed allodium title holders of ownership of the North American lands through terra nullius, land without owners. The Doctrine of Discovery, Inter Cetera Papal Bull, May 4th, 1493, and Feudal Lands Fee. Whereas many treaties that were made between the Crowns and the indigenous nations show clearly that Her Majesty, the Queen in right of Canada, and the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, were aware that the lands were not vacant, and that Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada and the Holy See were in a position of negotiations with the original inhabitants. These treaties, concordats, had been consistently encroached upon by the colonizers, which would also render them null and void under the Vienna Convention on Treaties of 1969 if the indigenous nations as allies had been allowed a voice within the United Nations and in the international courts. And whereas in 1945 the Charter of the United Nations proclaimed the respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples as one of its basic purposes. Self-determination means that the people of a colony or a dependent territory decide about the future status of their homeland. The process by which these territories exercise their right to self-determination is known as decolonization. And whereas in 1960 the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples was adopted by the UN. In its advisory opinion, the General Assembly of the United Nations had requested on 2 questions concerning Western Sahara to the International Court in regards to terra nullius. The advisory opinion of the 16th of October 1975, determined by the International Court judges in regards to the first question, stated that the court was unanimously of opinion that Western Sahara, Rio de Oro, and Sankit el Hamra at the time of colonization by Spain was not a territory belonging to no one, terra nullius. And whereas, through UN decolonization and the International Court's advisory opinion of 1975, outcomes now set a precedent in such that all lands claimed through terra nullius and the doctrine of discovery by Her Majesty the Queen, Spain, and the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, and all other colonizers in all other colonized countries are now rendered null and void, as most were inhabited by the indigenous nations throughout North, Central, and South Americas and the world. At present, North America is currently comprised of colonized corporations by Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada and the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State. And whereas, through complete decolonization, we will return all final decision-making authority of all national, federal, provincial, municipal, and international affairs to be shared among the people of North America, Turtle Island, with our new, true, independent governments within each of our countries, and working in conjunction with the indigenous original nations' people's councils as the original caretakers of these lands. Referendums can be done yearly or as often as they will be needed, which will allow the people to vote on issues that would have otherwise been voted on by politicians. And whereas by placing the voices of the people as final decision makers on issues for their countries assures that all decisions will be made by the people in consideration of the people and no longer in consideration of government, corporate, or personal greed. Politicians are to become true public servants without final decision-making authority, bringing issues to the people for their ridings referendums. And whereas the proof of our inalienable rights within international law has been provided herein and cannot be disputed or disproved of within the decolonization process. Therefore, all Canadian and United States militaries, National Guards, courts, and all law enforcement agencies and police will serve and protect the peoples of these newly independent countries and fall under the jurisdiction of the indigenous original North American nations of Turtle Island and people of Canada and the United States of America, and no longer be within the jurisdiction of Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada, nor the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, the City of London, and Washington, D.C. corporations. And therefore, we further demand that a moratorium be immediately executed to stop all exploitation of North American natural resources and all funds from the natural resources and lands exploited, sold, or transferred by Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada and the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, or by the present Canadian and United States governments, corporations, and including all taxation payments imposed upon the Canadian and United States peoples, and especially through health care, education, and social services rendered to Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada through Revenue Canada, the IRS for the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, since colonization, be internationally seized and returned to the indigenous North American nations and to Canada and the United States of America and all other decolonized and decolonizing countries, where exploitation of the people and their resources has occurred within their lands, especially since 1945 and beyond. And whereas we also demand that a moratorium be immediately executed in regards to nuclear, military equipment and arms sales or transfers of any military nature to other countries, as well as financial military aid will immediately cease, and all military, peacekeepers, and other military personnel will return to their respective countries other than those on humanitarian missions, we deem acceptable, as all wars must cease. We, the undersigned, further state that our true independent government of we, the people, will respect and honor all indigenous nation treaties and land claims neglected and disrespected by the governments, Her Majesty the Queen, and the Crown Holy See Vatican State, and to govern ourselves accordingly with respect of the indigenous nations as the caretakers of these lands and bearing equal weight within the two-row wampum, uphold the Silver Chain Covenant and the Dish with One Spoon treaties for all the peoples of Canada and the United States of America. We, the undersigned, declare and acknowledge, having read the entire 2 pages of The Great Peace, the Voice of Humanity, Decolonization Independence Referendum Declaration, and that we agree and consent completely to this undertaking by Ongwehowe Haudenosaunee peoples of the 5 nations and all original indigenous sovereign nations of North America, Turtle Island, and we, the people, citizens of Canada and the United States of America. If you'd like to print the petition, please go to our website at decolonizenorthamerica.org or .com. You may also join us on Facebook under Decolonize North America, as well as email us at decolonizenorthamerica@gmail.com. And please make sure to catch Natasha's show every Thursdays at 6